at her daddy when she goes to school for the first time, but Heather doesn't have a daddy. Then something interesting happens. When Heather and her classmates all draw pictures of their families, not one drawing is the same. The Los Angeles Times describes Heather Has Two Mommies as a modern classic. Booklist describes it as a charming, sweet-spirited story that still fills a need. And the New York Journal of Books says it's a warm and gentle view of a little girl starting school, meeting new friends, and discovering a wider world. The kids learn that differences are just another part of life. Screen It First, on the other hand, isn't such a fan of differences. That's clear right on the homepage, where LGBTQ+ content is featured as problematic. Its coverage of Heather Has Two Mommies relies on 4 images, the front and back cover plus 2 interiors, and the following comments. Puke emoji. 2 mamas and no dad, normalizing non-nuclear families. The whole book is about normalizing same-sex marriage. Non-nuclear family, different family structures. It seems that for Screen It First, there's only one way to be a family, and Heather's just doesn't cut it. For this library to consider distributing material promoting Screen It First would, in my opinion, be professional malpractice. And let me pause for some short information literacy instruction. When seeking information, it is incumbent upon the user to find the highest quality sources that one can. A high quality source in this case includes a signed review by a known author, known book reviewer with expertise in youth literature, not an anonymous person whose credentials are unknown, who relies on communicating with emojis. You have patrons from every walk of life, from a range of cultural backgrounds and with varied family structures. You have an obligation to serve them all with dignity and respect. Those services do not include supplying misinformation like Screen It First. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you. I think you will see that we have already rejected it because it is privately owned and we couldn't verify this.
Happy to hear it.
Any other comments on the agenda? Okay. Old business? No old business. Director's report.
Our Hope location has been okay. Hi, I am Dr. Erin Anderson. I am a local business owner. I'm also a local educator. First, I just want to say thank you to Jill and Maureen and the entire staff of the library. I think that you guys do a wonderful job and should be respected as the professionals that you are. For knowing what belongs in library collection, and I really appreciated what you had to say also as a former professional librarian. I think you made some great points. So I won't speak very long, but I do have a few points that I just wanted to bring up. I'm a little disappointed that Commissioner Sarnosky is not here. Some of my comments kind of have to do with his involvement in the screen, whatever it is, action that's happening. So first, I just want to say that banning books, very similar to what was already said, is really government censorship and should be treated as such, and I sincerely hope that that's nothing that's going to be sincerely considered. I'm so glad to hear that the Screen Rant or Screen whatever it is has been determined to not be a feasible source to use for determining what goes into the collection, hopefully not only because it's a for-profit company, but also hopefully because of the abusive language that appears on that site. If we're talking about censoring, then I feel like that just feels contradictory to me. I also, just for Commissioner Sarnosky's benefit, I wanted to say that as a business owner in the county, I really value my freedom to be able to do business the way that I want. And so far, the county commissioners have worked very hard to offer us as many rights as business owners as possible. They've fought for us when needed against state regulations. And this feels really contradictory if indeed, as I have heard, Commissioner Sarnowski is anti-ALA and pro-book ban, that feels really, really contradictory again, because as a business owner, then how can I trust somebody to fight for my freedoms as business owner when you're also trying to take the freedom to digest reading material or other media away from other people? That doesn't seem very trustworthy to me. As an educator, I would hope that the development of the county's kids are being taken into consideration when developing collections. I know that they are, again, you guys are more than competent. But when we start talking about banning books, it makes me think about how over the past couple of years, it's been extremely apparent in my classrooms exactly how far behind our kids have become because of COVID-19, because they were forced into a situation where they could not learn to their fullest potential. Banning books is going to create an even bigger problem over time. And I fully respect parents' right to decide what their kids read and what they don't read, but it is really dangerous to start limiting that for other people's kids. And I really, really hope that that's not going to be the case, whether we're using a for-profit company to determine our collection or not. I hope that the policy that is in place for putting in a complaint about a particular piece of the collection is not modified in any way that's going to make it easier for people to request book bans. So just all of that to say that I'm a little, I was very embarrassed actually this morning when I heard that this has been an issue that's been coming in front of the commission for a while now. And I hope that it really is, as you said, the end of it and that we don't hear anymore. So thank you for your time, and thank you to all of my students who are on the Zoom call right now. You guys are awesome.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where did you get the information that there were book bans?
I got the list of books that had previously been requested to be either banned or placed in.
But you're using that word, banned?
Yeah, banned. So when something is banned, it's usually
No, I
means
know
that
what
it's not,
banned means,
not
but there
allowed.
was never an issue,
So there was
banning-
never a conversation going around
not to
about
ban the books, no.
about books being removed from the public eye and put into a different collection.
Well, that's not banning books.
But it feels like it is though, because you're purposefully removing it from the public
And putting
eye.
it in a more appropriate, like the more obscene ones would go into an adult
Right,
section.
but your determination of the word obscene, which is a very
Well,
subjective term.
New Jersey has their own laws about obscene literature.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
That's
then,
that's what I was following.
okay, well, that's still a ban. If
And
you're
it wasn't-
keeping it
no,
out of
it's-
public eye, it's a
no, it
ban.
wasn't- No, it wasn't a ban.
So it's just censoring it, so that it's in a separate part of the library, hidden from people.
That has
If
not
it's
been
in the
done.
circulation, it wouldn't be hidden.
So it would be in the public eye, so then it wouldn't be bound.
No, it would be in an appropriate section, like the adult section, if
Right.
it was obscene.
So let me then ask you this, one of the books I believe was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Does that sound familiar?
Mhm.
That's a graphic novel, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so that should be in the graphic novel collection, right?
I have a copy of the book with me if anyone would like to look at it.
It's a great book. I've read it several times and taught it several times. But
And
that's
are there obscene pictures in it?
no, they're
Do you
nothing that I would
consider it
call
valid?
obscene.
You know what, maybe what's obscene to one person might not be obscene to
That's
the
the
That
point.
is
That's the point. Very good. That's the point. You got
You
that.
outed yourself and then you did it.
It does go both ways.
That's the
That's
point.
the point.
Okay,
That is the
okay.
point.
Yes,
You're right.
exactly the point.
Right.
If the library's collections are organized in a certain way,
We are.
that is a graphic novel. It belongs with the other graphic novels, which is what professionals in the field have determined. That's just the way it is. And if you remove it from that because of obscene, and for those of you on Zoom, I'm using big scare quotes there, then that is censorship. That is not reorganizing the library's catalog or anything like that.
5 minutes is done, and I appreciate your
What
comment.
town do you live in?
Yes,
I live in Buttsville.
thank you.
Buttsville.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
From
Guy Citron from Califon, Tewksbury. So before I came upstairs, I noticed that Mein Kampf, Gray's Anatomy, and Leviticus. That's the Old Testament. Those are all available. I read Leviticus. In Leviticus, you will learn that the Lord, which is a pretty serious title, commands us to sacrifice animals at the holiest of holy temples, which was destroyed, as we know. Whether or not someone reads that, I'll just leave that there. The last time I came here, I mentioned to the board that in North Hunterdon, we are experiencing a very coordinated, largely national, out-of-district attack against books in our library, and that there was going to be a vote. I think I invited you to come to see. About 100 people showed up to support the freedom to read. Dozens of students testified that the book in question had helped them. Parents of the community came to express their sadness at the fact that we even had to have such a conversation about what is or is not obscene. And even the board's own counsel appears to have advised the board of something. We don't know exactly what, but one of the board members alluded to the fact that perhaps they didn't have the legal ground to ban this book, and that they were exposing the district to a costly and lengthy lawsuit if they had. The vote was 7-4 to keep the book. So even after all that monumental groundswell of public support, we still had 4 people in positions of representative power saying, so what? That's an abuse of power. And it's very real and it's very serious. And it cuts in all directions to your own point. So when someone says banning books is dangerous, it sure is. When you erase a story that one little girl or one little boy needs to hear so that they can be validated in their experience, yes, it's dangerous. Sorry, I didn't really plan a speech or anything, but I'm reading a book right now called If These Stones Could Talk. It talks about the fact that we had a very real and serious slave trade in this part of New Jersey that I did not learn about in school. And there are names actually in this book of plantation owners from here in New Jersey, names that we all would probably recognize. And I bet, actually I shouldn't say bet, I'm not a betting person. I imagine that if someone wanted to include a book like this in a curriculum or a library or any other kind of public space, it could cause a kerfuffle. But it shouldn't. Because reading is not dangerous. Knowing the truth is not dangerous. The silencing of truth is dangerous. So, thank you for your time. I appreciate everything you all do.
Okay. You will. Thank you.
You can put your name on it. You got a name.
forth for quite a while in terms of definitions and things like that. So thank you, Douglas, for being here.
Do we have a copy of the question?
Thank you for having me.
I have the questions, I'll read the ones that I got here, and then we can go from other ones if you want. Douglas, can you define pornography for us in terms of what it is legally, I guess?
The law doesn't really define pornography as much as it defines obscenity, and what is obscene material. So there's two different definitions. One's the federal definition, the Supreme Court, and one is New Jersey. But they basically say the same thing. And what it says in New Jersey law, and I'm going to read it from the law rather than just reciting it. Obscene material is any kind of descriptive narrative display, so any kind of material, whether it's a picture, a publication, recording, etc., which A, depicts or describes in a patently offensive way ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, masturbation, excretory functions, or lewd exhibition of the genitals, and lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value when taken as a whole, and as a part of the work which to the average person applying contemporary community standards has a dominant theme which appeals to the prurient interest. And prurient interest is talking about something that really is redundant, because prurient interest is talking about something that has no value whatsoever. There's nothing redeeming about it. It's just appearing to a base value. That definition, by the way, appears in the criminal statutes about obscenity and what's obscene. It relates both to conduct as well as like selling of pornography or say materials.
Library Commission.
I'm sorry?
No, I think we had someone who was unmuted. You can
Okay.
continue.
So, just to be clear, that since I said it's almost the same as the Supreme Court, what the U.S. Supreme Court said is materials are obscene if the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. The work depicts and describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by applicable state law, which is why it started there, and taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So they're basically the same definition. And again, prurient interest is a morbid, degrading, and unhealthy interest in sex, and is distinguished from a mere candid interest in sex. And that's the definition that the U.S. Supreme Court has used for cases talking about the ability to ban materials, for example. So I think that answers the question. So I hope it does.
All three factors.
How can those terms apply to library materials, and are they likely to apply to library materials?
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, how do these terms apply? Did you say how would they apply to materials? Say the question again, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I heard.
How would these terms likely apply to library materials?
They would apply to library materials, I suppose, only to the extent that materials are being challenged as being obscene. The Supreme Court, by the way, went on to talk about, say, something like child pornography is outside the category of protected free speech, because the whole compass of what the whole atmosphere of what we're talking about, everything falls under the category of free speech. Because free speech is not only the constitutional right to speak freely, but it's also the constitutional right looked at, on the occasions where cases have looked at, I've said that they look at whether something is really over the line of being obscene, not whether, if it's not something that's gonna, again, offend the sensibilities, like, for your interest, things not gonna be found to be obscene. So in a library context, it doesn't matter if one person or a few people find something to be obscene. It has to be something that is broadly regarded that way, and that it has no redeeming value. Again, it's an unhealthy interest in sex is distinguished from your candid interest in sex, and it has to lack any serious artistic, political, or scientific value. So it would apply in the context of if there's something who's questioning whether something is obscene, is it really obscene, or is that just a personal opinion? Because if it's just a personal opinion, even if it's held by a group of people, if it's not held by the majority, then it's not, it wouldn't constitute obscenity.
Is there a difference between, whether an adult has access to it or a child has access to it?
In a library context, no. What most library policies, and I could double check ours to see if we put it in this one, is that the responsibility for monitoring exposure to materials for children is on the parents. When kids are dropped off at school, the school serves in local parentis, meaning the school is serving the place of the parents. And so that schools have certain responsibilities in terms of monitoring and protecting children. The law very clearly says that libraries are not in the same category. So the library is not in the position of taking the role of being the parent. So in terms of the materials, they can be placed wherever the author or the publisher of the book is characterizing it, whether it's the book is targeted to a young adult audience, a child audience, an adult audience, and as determined by the library professionals on staff. I just lost. Okay, I got that. So, to that extent, you would classify it, and it would be placed on the shelves accordingly, but the responsibility for avoiding children getting access to the materials falls on the parents. It doesn't fall on the library. Because different parents have different standards. Some would limit what the child can read, and others don't limit what the child can read. The library and the library board should make that determination. It's up to the parents to make that determination.
Next question is, what is the difference between censorship and banning?
I'm not sure there is much difference between censorship and banning. Because if you're banning materials, then you're censoring them, and excluding them from access to the public. So, I don't think there really is. Banning is a form of censorship. I suppose you can censor something. In a library context, actually, I think they're interchangeable. I think if you're banning something, then you're really censoring materials. And if you're censoring, that means you're banning them at least from a certain segment of the population, if not from everybody. So I think they're the same.
Is it considered censorship or banning if we limit access to materials, i.e. keep them behind the desk, shelved in a special location, applying rating labels, meant to distinguish the items in a certain way?
I believe it is, because you're making a subjective decision that we're gonna take these 10 books, and put them behind the shelf, but all the rest of them are not. So why are those books being specifically selected? That's a form of censorship. So, I think by limiting
system that basically rated the books in terms of sexuality and various parts of the content, so that would fall into the censorship range.
Oh, yeah, yes, because who is, I don't know where that website, what the source of that website is, but a library hires professional library staff, and the job of the library staff, particularly the librarians who are trained in this area, is to do to evaluate books and materials and to categorize them and put them where they should be. If you have some outside party, and I don't know who that is, usually, I mean, there may be somebody who happens to be a librarian who's involved in that, but those, in my experience, those kind of websites usually have a certain perspective, and they're promoting that perspective, and their list is rather is reflecting the perspective that they're advocating. So it's not an objective viewpoint. It's something that's coming from the perspective of whoever's creating that website. So just to give you an example, if you have one website like that where, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but where one which is more left-leaning, more liberal-leaning, another one which is more conservative-leaning, then the lists are going to be different because, and for the rating systems are going to be different, how things fall within those rating categories, because the people come from different perspectives. So yes, I do think any kind of system like that is a form of censorship.
I think you may have touched on this already. It has been suggested that we relocate some items to another collection, i.e. move it to an adult collection. Is this considered restricting access if the item is generally considered appropriate for another age group, i.e. a picture book, or if the author has indicated it's for a particular author or the protagonists are minors? That may influence why it may have been put in another collection.
So the question is, who is dictating or directing that it be moved from one place to the other? If it's been placed in a specific collection, it's there for a reason. Many books, when you open them, on the inside cover where it has all the information about, not the title page, but behind that, let me just grab a book here. All right, it's a paperback. I grabbed some dust.
And the rest of them are probably law books.
Okay, so it's a book that has, where the copyright is listed on the page. And generally speaking, when it's, in my experience, and this is my personal experience as a father of 5 kids, when it's targeted to a certain, like to a young adult audience, it says that on that page. There's something that's coming out from the publisher indicating what the intended audience is for those materials. So I believe you could have the Maureen give a more professional perspective, as because I'm not a librarian, to the extent that's followed, but I don't expect that is one of the criteria that the library staff use to determine where something is being shelved. If it's misshelved, it's one thing. If it's misshelved because somebody, based on their own subjective viewpoint, thinks that book is not appropriate for teens, say, and should only be in the adult section, that subjective viewpoint is a form of censorship.
If we intentionally remove an item due to controversy, weeding, is this considered censorship?
Same answer. Usually the purpose of weeding materials is materials that either are old or have outlived their useful life because based on the condition of the materials, or it's something that is outdated in terms of the content because it's talking about the world being flat and the world was discovered to be round. Extreme example of that idea, but not based on subject matter. If you're reading that wouldn't fit the purpose of weeding. And second, by removing it from the collection, that's sort of a self thing. If the library thought it was appropriate, library staff thought it was appropriate to include the materials originally, the fact that some folks, based on their personal viewpoints, think that it's problematic and therefore controversial, that's censorship. That's the same as banning the book by reading it out and excluding it from the collection.
Should professional staff consider whether an item might be controversial when ordering new items for the collections? Librarians' responsibility to follow code of ethics to support the freedom to read First Amendment.
I believe that librarians do follow a code of ethics that I think is published by the American Library Association in terms of a Bill of Rights and the freedom to read statements. And what they're doing, again, the First Amendment includes the right to receive, the right to read, freedom of inquiry, freedom of thought. So in selecting books for the collection, librarians are promoting and protecting First Amendment rights. Libraries are really a bastion of First Amendment protections and a sponsorship of First Amendment rights. Just by the fact that they have, by having a diverse collection, it means there may be materials there that I think I don't like or I don't think they're necessary or they're appropriate, but somebody else, my neighbor, does think it's perfectly fine. The fact that we have a difference of opinion, that's fine. That's what free speech is about, or the First Amendment freedom to read is about, that my neighbor can read what she thinks is appropriate and materials, and I read what I think is appropriate, and if I don't like the other materials because I find them offensive, then I should just stay away from them and not pick them off the shelf. Not appropriate. I don't have to take out the book. That's a form of self-censorship, and that is actually a First Amendment right. If I'm censoring myself and saying, I don't want to read this materials on this subject, these kind of materials, because I don't think those are appropriate, I'm self-censoring, and that is appropriate because then I'm exercising my freedom to read, because the freedom to read is also the freedom not to read. But when you're imposing it on somebody else, then it's problematic. Then you're restricting First Amendment rights. But when you're just imposing it upon yourself, and on yourself would include a parent over their child, over their own child, but of course not over other people's children.
As a library commission, how can we mitigate legal liability related to our library collection and how it is used?
Well, there's not legal liability.
If someone decides to sue us about something, either having something in the collection or not having, or not having in the collection.
Well, okay, what I learned many years ago as a lawyer is that anybody can sue anybody else for anything at any time.
Yeah.
And so if someone decided to sue the library and waste the public assets by having the library having to defend that lawsuit, the remedy that they would be looking for, there's not a monetary remedy. When you think of liability, usually you're talking about something of value. Generally speaking, they would be looking for as it's called an equitable remedy, meaning a non-monetary remedy, essentially forcing the library board to remove the materials from the shelf, remove it from circulation. So I don't see the liability as having to spend money to defend the First Amendment rights that you're trying to protect, but there's not really exposure to liability by the fact that you have what's in the collection. I can find it real quick. I found it. There's a Supreme Court case in 2003 where the Supreme Court recognized that public libraries is saying that it's up to the library staff to figure out what should be included in the collection. And so, there's not liability per se, for the library if somebody doesn't like that something is included. Again, the remedy to that is that they just don't have to take that book off the shelf. It's much like there's a lot of magazines that are sold in stores, and in places that sell, probably less now, but you go down the street like in New York City on a newsstand, they have all kinds of materials that a lot of people have no interest in because they would find those materials offensive, but they also may have, I don't know, I'm trying, Newsweek or something, I'm trying to think of something that's really, really benign, that most people would not find offensive. They might not agree with it, if there's a certain slant to it, but it's not the same thing, and the option is just not to don't buy the other one, just buy the one that you find not offensive. So, I don't see liability, but again, if the library board got sued by somebody, because the board refused to remove materials that individual felt to be inappropriate, or they wanted to remove them, the board did not agree, did not remove it. I'm happy to defend that case because I think it's a strong case for the library board. I think you would be doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing as a library board, but protect your First Amendment rights by not bowing to the individual perspectives of one or a small group of people, and rather protecting the right of all the people to have access to the materials. So the liability there is the cost of having to defend the lawsuit.
You have reviewed our collection development policy. Is there anything in it that I know you sent us some minor changes in terms of the way we may not have been consistent with some words or something like that. Was there anything in there that we should have improved or content-wise?
Well, I'm looking at, I have the policy in front of me now. That's like my estimate. And one of the things that I mentioned is the freedom to read statement, and indeed, under the beginning of the policy, the general principles, says the Warren County Library adopts as its basis for collection development policy the following statement as approved by the Latin American Library Association, and it says, Library Bill of Rights, freedom to read statement, freedom to view statement. And goes on to say that libraries have profound responsibility to engage, encourage, and support intellectual freedom by making it possible for the user to choose freely from a variety of offerings. It's the library's goal to provide the community with a diverse collection of materials in a variety of popular formats, which provide a wide range of views, expressions, interests, and opinions. Libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current historical issues. Materials should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. Selected materials may include items that are controversial in nature or unpopular with some members. The library's acquisition of these items does not constitute an endorsement of their content. Libraries do not advocate the ideas found in their collections or in resources accessible through the library. That's vital, very important information. And I did not read that. I mean, I read it obviously with the policy, but I didn't reread it prior to getting on the Zoom tonight. But that's exactly what I was saying, and so the policy is really advocating exactly what you should be doing. The policy does have provisions for a request for consideration of materials, so that if somebody thinks that there's something that's problematic or misplaced, a member of the public, hopefully it's a library card member who does this, there is a process that they could ask to have the material examined. I think that should be limited to only people who have Warren County Library cards, the cards that are usable there. That's what I'm double checking to see if it says that.
I think it may say our service area. I think
Yes, in my view, I would narrow this because, and this is not strictly a matter of law, because there's not necessarily law on this exact piece, but if you have a body of people who, within the county, anybody who lives within the county can get a library card for free, right? A certain subset of that group of people actually takes the time to get a library card. And then a smaller subset of that group actually uses their library card and borrows materials or participates in programs and services of the library. To allow anybody who lives in the county to challenge library books when they are not even a library card holder doesn't make that much sense to me, because they're not even opting to join the club, but yet they want to do the things the club is doing. Even more so, somebody who's outside of Warren County, or even outside the participating communities in the library, what right do those people have to say about what materials are in the collection of the Warren County Library? So I think that it should be narrow who can do it, so that the collection is reflecting the tenor of the community, not some people who may live in the Midwest who decide to send out challenges to books because there's no limitation on who can do it. I'm not picking on the Midwest of the United States, but there certainly have been a lot of cases where challenges were submitted and they were not from the local community. And so now some outsider is trying to interfere with the First Amendment rights of people in the community. And I think that that's not consistent. So I would keep it narrow. One of the things, it says, request for consideration may only be accepted of individuals who reside in the library service area. So while it could be narrower, that is a narrowing that's not inconsistent with what I'm saying. And so that's what we need to change. It also says, which I think is important, that requesters must have read, heard, or viewed the entire work to have challenge consideration. Okay. Completed the resource concern form, etc. To give you one example, I saw, I read an account of a woman in Florida who was challenging a series by James Patterson called Maximum Ride, which is a young adult teen series. And she admitted that she had never read the series and didn't really know what it was all about. But nonetheless, she submitted challenges to all 7 books that are in the series in terms of how they were being classified. Why would she have the right to do that? That's really an interference when she's not even, doesn't know what she's talking about. She's doing it based on what she heard from somebody, or because, I don't know what, she didn't state any criteria, because she doesn't have any, because she doesn't even know what's in the material. So I think it's important, and the policy does do that, that if you're going to challenge it, at least have some sense of what it is you're challenging, that you know what's in the material, and it's not that you read somewhere or heard somewhere something bad about it and you decided to go along.
that's the questions I have. Does the commission have another question?
No, thank you, sir.
I just wanted to ask, I just was unclear, as far as the censorship. So if a child comes into the library with a parent, and I do believe that parents do have the responsibility to give or not give their kids whatever books they want or don't want. But if they go in a library and they want a specific book but can't find it and ask their parents to help them, and then the parent finds it, it's just not in the kids section because of the content, it's in the adult section. That's censorship, even though the library offers it? Because the parent can help the child get the book. Why would that be censorship if it was something with obscenities in it, or pornography, or whatever you wanna call it? If it's in the adult section, it's still available, the parent would just have to at it, or the parent could point the kid to it, why would that be censorship?
If the book, it was written and distributed to be targeted to a certain audience, then somebody then is making a decision that that target audience is not right, and they're going to make their own decision to move it to someplace else.
Well, who decides who the target audience is? The author?
Again, and Maureen, maybe you can help me on this. Do you know the part on the inside of the books that I was referring on the copyright page?
Yes. And it
Okay,
does it often has the cataloging of the book, and it may describe, what the book's about and the content. And we also use other materials to, put it in the right collection based on often the age group of the characters, protagonists in a book, or, the reading level of a book. Obviously, books about teenagers are probably more popular with teenagers than books, adults may read them too, but they're more of a teen, when the characters are, coming of age books and things like that,
So the libraries are using objective information to make a determination of where that book should be placed within the library, in what category, what section of the library, what section of the board. And then if somebody is moving it to a different section, what's the basis on which they're doing it? And why does it, what qualifications does that individual have to decide that it should be in, the professional staff says, based on all of the collective information, because they don't just get a book and do it randomly. There's thought that goes into each, the classification of each book and where it's placed. So if you've had that analysis done by your professional staff, who is it that's going to decide that, no, we're gonna move it from this section from the children's section to the adult section? And then that's based on whose determination and what qualifications do they have to make that determination. They are exercising censorship because they're doing it based on their own personal perspective. There's a case that's still ongoing, but it arose in Texas, and I was here, that where a library board tried to limit what books the library could have on its shelves. And the preliminary determination was, it got to the judge, and the judge said, put them all back. That you as a board don't have the right to do that. It's the professional staff that makes the determination, not the library board. And the library board was directed to return all those books and put them back on the shelves while the case worked its way through. I also note that in the law, there's a specific definition of what the powers of the library board of trustees are. And it says nothing in those powers about controlling the content of a collection. It says nothing about that. It says they're authorized to purchase materials and exchange it between the libraries, but the selection of materials is not something that's listed as one of the powers of the library board under the New Jersey state law. So I think that if whoever it is that's deciding to move that book because they don't like some of the language in the book and move it from a child section to an adult section is making a subjective determination, and that's censorship. That same person, though, if they don't like it, would follow the policy and file a challenge. And in the challenge, a request for request for reconsideration. And in that request, it say, based on these things, I believe that the material should be in the adult section, not in the children's section. And then it's being viewed by professional staff in terms of making the determination based on that request for reconsideration. So they're looking back at it and say, let's make sure we didn't make a mistake in terms of our reasoning, because people are fallible, people can make mistakes. And they could look at it and they could say, all right, based on this request for reconsideration, we're reconsidering and we're moving it. Or we looked at it again and we think it was appropriately categorized where it was placed and it's gonna stay there. So there's a way to ask that be done, but whoever's moving that book doesn't have a right to do it.
So I just wanna ask one follow-up. So if it was decided to move a book with, obscenities, pornography in it, could the library get sued for just moving it? Even though it's not being censored? It's just being moved to a different section, it's still available to anybody that wants to see it.
If you're moving it censored, this has been answered already.
Would the library have the ability to get sued for that?
Well, again, look, anybody can sue.
Yeah, no, I know, I understand that.
But.
Would you take on that
if-
case?
Suing the library, I would never sue a library.
No, I mean,
But I
if
defend that
somebody,
case.
right.
Yes, I absolutely would defend that case, because, again, one of the quotes that I read, and I hope people know, is that when it says, public libraries should be afforded broad discretion in their collection selection. Part of collection selection is not only choosing what goes into the collection, but how it's categorized, and where it's placed. And so, if the library made the determination, let's say there was a request for reconsideration, and based on the request, the material was moved from the children's section to the young adult, or from the young adult to the adult section, then the library has exercised discretion to its professional staff to make that determination. Then it's not censorship, because it's being done not based on some subjective perspective, but based on objective analysis. And then whoever's trying to bring that claim would have no legal basis to do that, because the fact that you moved it and say, well, I think it should have been characterized there, much like I said that the person who moved it and what rights do they have and what they're using their subjective perspective, the same holds for somebody who objects to it being moved and said, no, it should stay in child. No, if the library made an objective determination that the book should be in adult and not children, it's the same thing. That person's trying to censor or limit the library's discretion, we'll say, and that they don't have a basis on which to argue that no, it should have been in the other place. Because a judge should not be in a position to second guess what the library staff has made as the determination on the basis of it.
So where does New
yeah,
Jersey, the 2C34-3 come in then?
It doesn't.
That's what I think you read in the very beginning.
UC 34-3 is the obscenity law.
That's what you read in the beginning, right?
Right, the person's under 18. That is right. And well, there's after the definition section of there, it talks about again, this is a criminal statute, so it's talking about crimes by individuals, although in some cases it could be an organization. And after the definition section, the second section, B, is promoting obscene material. And so the person who sells, distributes, rents, or exhibits to a person under 18 years of age obscene material is guilty of a crime of the third degree. But when it's talking about exhibits, it's talking about the sale. In other words, what this law is trying to control is business, in some kind of, for business purposes of some kind, selling or distributing obscene materials. If materials characterize, the fact that somebody thinks materials are pornographic because they have description of something that's sexual, or drawings or pictures of something that's sexual, doesn't make it obscene. But if the material that the library staff believes to be obscene, then they're not going to purchase, and they're not going to offer that material as part of the collection. Because the library is not interested in having or displaying obscene materials. So if it's clear that hurdle, it's not going to be, it has to be done knowingly, and it's not knowingly displaying obscene materials when it went through the initial process of selection, and it applied the criteria that are set out in the policy as to the basis for the selection. The statute they're talking about criminal acts of obscene material doesn't apply. Because it wouldn't be obscene, because that's the whole point of the screening process, is the libraries are not purchasing materials that are legally obscene, the legal definition.
So-
It may be a person's personal viewpoint, they might think it's obscene, but there's a legal definition, and if it's not something that's meeting that legal definition, then it's
So are libraries then basically exempt from this statute? Public libraries.
I heard you.
Okay.
I don't think I know a specific answer to that, meaning that I didn't research this law relative to seeing if there's a specific exemption for public libraries. I could look into it more deeply and give you an answer.
Yes,
subsequent.
yes,
But
thank you.
As of now, I can't tell you specifically whether it is or is not.
Yeah, I think that's important for everybody to know that, for sure.
Just trying to see if there's something. Just trying to see if there's something I can see quickly to be able to give you an answer, not have you have to wait. I'm gonna have to find a way. I think that because it's really targeted at the actions of people, that the library would not be covered, but I will get you something more definitive on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
That's it.
Douglas, can you update us on, there is a new law in New Jersey, that's going through at this point? Or it's been introduced again?
Is that about the freedom to read that?
Yes.
Well, I have it in front of me, and I have honestly not read the entire thing. But the purpose of the statute, was, it says, establish requirements for library materials in public school libraries and public libraries, and protects school library, media specialists, and librarians from harassment. The intention of it initially, because I spoke to Senator Zucker, who was the primary sponsor of this. Originally, the intention was to make sure that librarians library staff members were protected, and that one from harassment, which is what we've seen in some places, but as well as if they could be compelled to engage in the banning of books or in the censorship of books. So it has things like, the bill requires boards of ed and governing bodies of public libraries, so like the library board, to adopt policies, creating a procedure, essentially a reconsideration procedure, which is notable because a lot of libraries already have that, but obviously not all of them do. It requires boards of education and governing bodies of public libraries to include diverse and inclusive material within their respective libraries. So I was talking about a cross-section of materials. Students are able to reserve, check out, or access any age and grade appropriate material, including diverse and inclusive materials. Residents are able to reserve, check out any library material, including diverse and inclusive materials. And it defines those as any material that reflects any protected class as enumerated or set out in the law against discrimination. Also includes, regardless of where, not only what the subject matter is, that it has to be non-discriminatory, but also you can't exclude it based on the protected status, meaning the race, the gender, the national origin, religion, etc. of the author. So it's of the author, it's of the characters, and what, yeah, that's basically what it says.
You wanted to know the status of it though, right?
And it hasn't been passed at this point, correct?
It has not been passed, it's still pending, but it's gotten broader support. The original bill was introduced, it was ill-conceived, because the original bill said that if a library or a school district engaged, if a library engaged in book banning, then the library would lose access to state aid. So it was backwards thinking, because it's saying if a library, somebody was forcing a library to remove materials, then the library would be punished. And so that bill was withdrawn and rewritten so as to protect the library rather than punishing the library. And there's, the primary bill is a bill in the New Jersey State Senate, but there's an identical bill that's in the New Jersey State Assembly. And so it's working their way through both of those houses. And it seems like it's on its way to passage, although it has not been passed as of yet.
Any other questions from the commission? There was one question that somebody asked, if the commission doesn't, I can read it to you, I think it's, there was one, I saw one question.
I see one. There's a question that says, do you want me to read this? It says, I thought the foreign law said that if we can prove the book has literary merit, doesn't that mean it shouldn't be censored? Is that the question you're talking about?
I think so, yes.
I agree with that statement, and that's why when we talked about the definition of obscenity, or of obscene material, whether it's under the federal or state law, it says that to be obscene, it must lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value when taken as a whole. So, if you prove that it has literary merit, doesn't that mean it shouldn't be censored? it means that it's not obscene, and so yes, so it should not be censored. Doesn't mean that every library has to take every book. There's a lot of materials out there that the library can have every piece of material, but it would not be obscene unless it lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value when taken as a whole. So that means if it has literary, artistic, political, or scientific value taken as a whole, then it is not obscene, and therefore there's no basis under obscenity law to exclude it. I want to point out though, that it says when taken as a whole. So that means if there's a chapter in a book that somebody says, well, this chapter is really offensive because it's talking about.
It's on this point.
What has the question? Whatever it is that person finds to be offensive. The law is talking about it that it's taken as a whole. So if it's one chapter out of a whole book, and the rest of the book is not, and looked as a whole, although it's got one chapter that's got something very graphic in it, the rest of the book clearly has literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Under the law, it's not obscene just based on what's in that one chapter. Any other questions?
We have one question from the audience, as long as it's brief.
Yeah, just a very quick question and first a comment, Mr. Zucker. Thank you for your thoughtful and understandable explanations. Regarding the three factors, at the federal level, Supreme Court level, you alluded to the Miller test, although you did not name it as such. Perhaps it might be helpful to explain how those three factors work together, or be explicit about saying that all three factors must be met in order for something to be declared obscene. That might help clarify the answer to the last question as well.
Okay, let me just pull that back out again. I can do that. But when I read it, I said between each of the criteria, I said and the questioner, and I don't know your name, and I didn't say your name anyway, but is correct in that the test is talking about it has to. Just give me a second, and I'll pull it back up. That all of those factors have to be, well, I'll just use the state one, which again is not the Miller test, which is Miller is the Supreme Court case for which those factors are drawn. But the state test is very similar to the one that the Supreme Court discussed in Miller, and the three criteria, it says that the picture describes in a patently offensive way ultimate sexual acts, etc., and lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value as a whole, and is part of the work which the average person applying contemporary community standards, and has a dominant theme which appeals to the prurient interest. The factors are not independent of one another. All of the factors have to apply, or all of them have to be lacking either way, for something to be considered to be obscene. It's a three-part test, meaning all three parts have to exist. So the fact that somebody may determine that something lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, but it doesn't depict or describe things in a patently offensive way. I mean, there's a lot of books for kids which don't have anything that's patently offensive, but I really question the literary value of some of those books. And there's nothing offensive about them, but if you try to read them, even when you're reading them to a 2-year-old, they seem to lack a lot of value. But they're not because it has to go apply all three parts of the test.
Thank you. Yeah, nothing but.
Well, thank you, Douglas. We kept you for the hour, as we said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Censorship exemption the law, and I'll send it to Maureen, and you can distribute it accordingly.
Alright, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger. Okay, it's open to the floor again.
Henry, we do have a comment on Zoom,
Oh.
we're alternating.
Sorry.
Up and down.
Michal Rees Veras would like to make a comment.
Fine.
Hi, Ms. McCarris had to leave, so I could read her comment for her. My name is Grace. So what she said is, her question is, how are these books harmful? What exactly is it that they are teaching that would result them in being censored? Because if we all see around the U.S., there is simply an ongoing theme of censorship when it comes to topics that are not being the norm. It seems as if this perception of what is obscene are simply based on personal morals. And if that is it, then you can choose to not read, but not to limit access for others because it's simply a form of control, controlling our views and perceptions of topics instead of creating our own.
Thank you. We have not banned anything at this point. And,
And
what? Go ahead.
we're trying to.
No, we're not. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Nicole Walters. I'm a lifelong patron of the Warren County Library System since the age of 5. I can tell you as someone quite intimately familiar with the collections as a child, combing through literally every book I could find. The amount of obscene material I came across was limited. I brought Fun Home today because it was on the list. I understand that the tool that was listed earlier is not going to be used, but I wanted to share what this story is about. This is about a gay woman who is dealing with the suicide of her father, who we presume is also a gay man that was closeted. And the objectionable parts, I think, are a cartoon drawing of a penis that's anatomically correct and not erect, a lesbian embrace, and I forget the last one. As to our question earlier about who categorizes these, mine says the Library of Congress catalog, so I would assume that this is a pretty rigorous process. I considered being a librarian myself, but unfortunately these poor people do not get paid enough, and I needed to eat and make a living. I'm an autistic woman that grew up in a very Catholic household that did not have access to these materials except at the library. Fun Home was not in my library, but by the age of 10 and then 16, I had attempted suicide twice. Maybe if a book like this had been present, I would have not felt so alone in such a rural part of New Jersey. I also just wanted to say, what's the purpose of a library? It's a repository of information. There's plenty of information that we don't like that's in here. And I'm glad that we've had a thorough discussion on this. As a descendant of someone who was conscripted as a teenager to fight for Hitler, who saw the excuse of pornography used to burn books, this is quite disturbing to me. If you don't know the difference between pornography and art, I don't know what to tell you. And the last thing that I will say is thank you to the library staff. You've always been supportive, and this has always been a welcoming place, and I hope it continues to be so.
What town do you live in?
I live in Phillipsburg, but previously Hardwick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Good evening. My name's Paul Escola. I'm from Alamucci. It's my first time at one of these meetings. First, I want to say thanks to the commission and to the library staff. You do a wonderful job, and I see how you really try to do the right thing. I'm kind of surprised myself for not realizing how much has kind of arisen about things like this. I get surprised at how much the terms, pornography, obscenity, and even controversial get thrown around. Controversial things are probably books are probably the most important books at certain times. Society changes, governments change, laws change. Life is hard, relationships, sex, everything like that. And some of these controversial books are really the ones that can help people try to figure out where to go or what their life is doing and things like that. I think back to some of the books I've read, Catcher in the Rye, the Bible, 1984, Animal Farm. Luckily, I got to read them when they weren't banned, but they've all been banned at some time. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of reaction to say, please don't take away that access to that really important information. And I see that, and it seems like the community really backs that. And I just want to say thanks. I want to say thanks to Doug, too. He really gave a really useful, informative presentation as well. That's probably all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Julie Basinski, Hope, New Jersey. We have our own library. Awesome. And we love the staff there, and they're doing a fantastic job, and I will say they always do. And we look forward to the new library one year. Just a couple tidbits. I don't have anything really broad. I think Doug said anything way better than a layperson like me could say, but I've been in literacy for over 20 years. I know the literacy standards from pre-K all the way through, 12th grade, and I know them like the back of my hand. It's what I live and breathe, right? And I have students that I am in charge of, whether it be a whole school or just one classroom, and I see students from all different walks of life, bringing all different kinds of feelings to the day and to their life, and the backpack they carry with all of that in there, right? And the library is a place, at least in my classroom, where they can find themselves, they can find others like them, they can find someone just like them that's just gone on a quest and defeated a dragon. They might be gay, it's okay. They might have two moms and it's okay. They might have two dads, they might live with grandma. And these are all real things, real children that get to see themselves in books, and get to enjoy a book without having to ask, why am I not like that? Why don't I have those characteristics? So to the library staff, I thank you. The kindred spirit I found in books was Anna Green Gables. She is my kindred spirit. I'm wondering if there is, and I know all boards work differently, but if there's professional development for boards around things like perhaps the literacy standards, or some of the work, this I thought was great tonight. This was a great professional development for all of us, right? But if there's anything that the board does to understand different facets of what the library really offers people and what your charge is as volunteers, which is amazing. Amazing that you come here and volunteer. And you are all amazing that you are here when you could be home with your kids, you could be doing bath time, you could be reading a book of your own or watching your favorite show, whatever it is, making dinner, right? And so you're amazing for being here. And as stewards of this work, you guys are so amazing. I'm trying to keep this all so positive. One thing that really resonated with me that Doug had said was that it's not going to be a small group of people that gets to say what everyone has access to. And that really, made my heart sing a little bit, I guess, because, people are scared. People are scared. I mean, we're here, we're scared. about banning books. And it's a real fear of ours. And I don't wanna argue that, yes, you're doing it, no, you're not, it's censorship, it's not. We're here because that's our fear, right? Whether you said it in those words or not, that's the people's fear. And it's a large group of people, right? And each week I think we expand with who's here because we're afraid of it. We're afraid of that child not having access to seeing themselves and not finding their kindred spirit. And that's why we're here. Lastly, I wrote it down. Oh, the thought of parents, you know, kids asking their parents, where is that book? The one that, you know, is behind the library's desk or in a different place. They don't know to ask that. Go to a library and watch children with books. They'll sit with a stack this high that they've pulled from those shelves because this one has a dog, this one looks like me, just like the colors on this one, right? That's how they find books. They don't find them by saying, Mom, I need this one, I think the ISBN number is, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So with that said, I'm trying to keep it positive, lighthearted. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for everything you do, for all the books that have been read through the libraries of Warren County. Think about how much, that's all inside of us. You read a book, it's inside of you, and you get to keep it. That's so amazing. So thank you for doing that for thousands and thousands and thousands and maybe 100,000 books, right? That are now inside people that can never be taken away. Thank you for your volunteer time. I know it's a lot, and me talking is keeping you later, so I'm gonna stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep it really, really quick. All right, I will keep this super quick, since I know all y'all are probably kind of tired of hearing from me. Hi, I'm Sandy Roberts, Blairstown Township. I am a mother and very proud to have my own 2 children here in the room today. I am an educator. I've been a STEM educator for a very long time. I worked here at the library. I'm very privileged to have done so. It was a wonderful time in my life to be a part of this team. And I'm a scientist. So it's very important to me, that distinction between subjective and objective that was spoken before. I'm not going to go into all of that, but I thought that was a really good point to make. Because we all have feelings. We're human beings. We're all fallible. We're human beings. We need to have guidelines that are beyond our own, you know, human selves that help us make decisions. And so I really want to say thank you for a great presentation today. I thought that was really helpful and informative. I just wanted to come up and share very quickly. You were asking some people, where did you get this information? Probably from me. I've been coming to these meetings for a while. Knowledge is, I cannot express how important knowledge is to me as an educator, as a scientist, and as a mother. The library is where a librarian, when I was a little girl, put a book in my hand about the shark lady, and I, for the first time, imagined myself as a scientist. And now, here I am. I am a scientist. My children have had amazing experiences in this library. I grew up in my library, they grew up in theirs. My mom, as a young girl, without a father, and with, unfortunately, an alcoholic mother, when she needed to figure out what was happening to her body when she got her period, she learned that at the library. Because those were the people that took the time to explain it. I recently had the privilege and honor to speak at the White House. I've been doing a lot of work around diversity and inclusion in STEM, education, and the workforce. And one of the things that we talked about a lot, and that I personally am extremely committed to at this point in my career, doing a PhD in this stuff, is the sense of belonging that is incredibly important for all of us as human beings. For us to be able to meet our potential, to feel successful, to change the world, we need to feel that we belong. The library is a place where we can all belong, where we can go on the quest for knowledge, to understand ourselves, our world, and hopefully improve it a little bit. I'm incredibly thankful for the work that you do, all of you, and for every single person, whether or not I agree with you, that's here today, because you took the time to be here today. Libraries are special, they're magic, they need to be protected and honored, and I appreciate the discussion that we had today. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Brianna Devlin. I am a resident of Hackettstown. Again, like everyone else, I'd like to thank everyone here. We're all spending time here for our community in whatever way is possible. Thank you to the people behind me who spoke, scientists, doctors, lawyers. I do marketing. I want to give a different perspective of where I kind of come from all this, because we're talking a lot about kids and children. Like Heather, I grew up with two mommies. Back in 2004, my mom came out. In 2006, I met my future stepmom. It's a lot different world that we're living in now, where kids do have more access to learn about the things that I didn't know that I was experiencing. Father-daughter dances were all around me. You know, bring your father to school day. I didn't have a place in that. I didn't know that there was a world where a book written in 1989 that would have explained that and made my life as a child, which is why we're all here, right? That's what we're saying. It's about the children, and I get it. The word ban isn't being used. I know it's not being used, it's being moved. But then it gets moved from a place where a child, like myself, back in 2006, would have been able, on my own, which I think children have the right to learn as well, that there are other people that were like me, that grew up with two parents of the same sex. That wasn't around me. I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Sarasota County, Florida, where everyone had came in, they had their fathers, their parents. I came in where people were like, are you gay too? That was the knowledge that we had back then. We're so lucky. We're so lucky to have people that are writing books that can explain in the simplest terms that just because you may be a little different and your experience might be a little different than everyone else around you, that's okay, and there's a community for you. And me having two moms made me a good community member. I'm a hard worker. I rescue animals. I have a great partner, you know? And I become a good member of my community, just like I think everyone else is here too. We're all trying to be good members of our community, whatever that means to us. And to limit the members of our community that we've fostered, that are just our neighbors, and not giving them the opportunity that is accessible to them when people like myself and people, God, decades before me, never had. And I don't know if, I went to my first drag show when I was 7, and I think to a lot of people, it's like, oh my God, I'm here, I'm cool, I know a lot of people. I'd have a beer with all of you, I think. But the thing is that was the most important to me is that we're speaking for children. I'm 28 now. We're speaking for children who are all across the board going through something different that we can't even bother to explain. I don't know what it's like to grow up with a father and a mom. I can't speak to that. I can't speak to not having parents at all and just being raised by my grandparents. But what would help those kids is information. And even if it's a picture book or something that they can go to their children's section, and I get it moving it to where adults have access to it. But they're not the ones that I care about right now. I care about the kids like me. And guess what? You move it over there, then it gets moved over there, and then it gets moved over there, and then nobody can find it. So I get it. The word banning is scary on both sides. I think for us it's scary. For you it's scary because it makes it sound like what you're trying to do is worse. But moving is just as bad. And I hope that with all of the intelligent people, or me, this Muppet who's up here just telling you about what my life was growing up, hope you at least understand that perspective. And it isn't this big of a fight, and it's not that scary. We're just trying to all be as informed as we possibly can. And I want to thank you guys, because you make that possible. Thank you. Thank you.
here, I don't know where people are hearing, and I understand there's a different opinion on banning and censoring and everything else. We're not talking about homosexuals and gays. Anything that was brought up about sexually explicit verbiage.
And there was a period of time where my two moms were considered sexually explicit material.
It had nothing to do with different families. I don't know where anybody's getting that information. So you have to be careful that you have your facts right, so you have that you have an informed opinion.
I think what you meant to say is thank you for sharing your story, and then what you just said.
You're welcome.
Incredibly rude.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
We are not banning the books. Getting an end of story.
I have someone who was on the Zoom on my phone that would like to comment, but they can't, their Zoom is not working. So is it okay if they talk through my phone?
Sure, we can.
All right.
Hopefully hear.
Hi, Robin.
Hey.
Okay, you have to say your name and then it's your turn to speak.
Okay, I'm Robin Jensen. I used to live in Warren County. I am no longer living there, but my family and I have been affiliated with the library, Warren County Library, for decades. Okay? I have a couple of things to say. Is it still okay?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. First off, I have a question, but I want to make an observation. The people that are sitting at the front at that desk, Maureen, Jill, they all have masters in library sciences. They are more than qualified to make judgments on quality of books, locations of books. Plus, I rely on the Library of Congress. It's just not a snap decision. And they are professionals, but yet this is just an observation and not a judgment. The only professional that I hear being asked any kind of important question that matters is the lawyer and if we could be sued. And that seems silly. But now my question is this. What makes someone else's opinion and reading materials override my child going in and browsing the graphic novels, the juvenile fictions, the juvenile non-fictions, where they have to go to a special area? Why not just look it up in the card catalog? Parents have to parent. Look it up in the card catalog for the parents that have issues with that, and it would tell you it has certain subject matters in it. Instead of creating a whole new collection that makes it special, why not just do that? Have their parents come in and do parenting. Okay, that's all I got to say. I appreciate everything that Warren County has done, the library. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Robin.
Where is their home?
Thank you.
She doesn't live here.
Robin used to live in Buttsville. Robin was actually a former branch manager of the Warren County Library. Thought that her opinion about collection development was valuable.
And where is she now?
She lives in Georgia.
Thank you. Is there any other comment? Come ahead.
My name is Caitlin Koscielik, and I live in Blairstown, New Jersey. I grew up here and have been going to the library system in this area for my entire life. And honestly, I find it awful that there isn't more of a lot of these books, because it could have helped me a lot growing up to have characters that I could see myself in. To not have to wonder if what I was going through was normal. And I find it really frustrating to have someone talk about and twist words in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense, because it feels like you aren't listening to the people around you. As the lawyer said, just a few minutes, or an hour ago, or whatever. In the case of the library, moving books to a new section and banning them is functionally the same. So I don't think it's a matter of whether or not we're banning the books. I think it's a matter of what right the people suggesting that we move these books, what qualifications they have to say that, to suggest that. If you are not a qualified professional in that field, and in the field of child psychology or library sciences, then I think it's an important protection of our First Amendment rights that have no sway over what we do with our library collections. Because what's the difference between burning a book and hiding it on the top shelf to a 5-year-old? Either way, they'll never see it. That's all I have to say.
Anyone? Thank you all for coming tonight for your opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us speak.
Public meeting. Okay,